PEX is the easiest pipe to install. You just grab some pipe, you grab some fittings, you grab some crimp rings, and you crimp them. But it also makes it the easiest pipe to install incorrectly. So I'm going to show you everything you need to know to install PEX B and not make any mistakes. First of all, make sure you're not mixing PEX A and PEX B fittings. I'm going to show you a little bit later what those fittings look like, but just make sure you're getting all the same system. We're only going to talk about PEX B today because I think it's the easiest and the most user-friendly. First mistake to avoid is damaging the pipe. So PEX B is flexible, but you can only bend it so far before it kinks. And if you get to that point where it kinks, you got to either cut that kink out or just get a new pipe. Now, the cool thing about PEX, I think, is you can actually use a 90-degree angle like this, or you can actually bend the pipe without fittings, and you can put them in these other plastic, or this is a metal one, 90-degree angle. So you just put the pipe in here, and then bend it around. Oh! See, that's what you don't want to do. So once it gets to this point, you would have to cut that out or get a new piece of pipe. But if you were a little more gentle, and maybe if this was not an old pipe, you would bend this around. Or maybe not. I guess because there's a kink there now. There we go. Yeah, so ignore that. But you could bend the pipe, and theoretically, for every 90-degree angle, as long as you had enough room to make that 90, because it's going to be a little bit of a longer sweep than the straight 90, right? So you need a little more room to make that 90. But you could avoid using fittings and save probably a bunch of money if you don't have to use a lot of fittings. So this is a great option for PEX B, but if this happens to you, do not use this pipe. Also, the cool thing about PEX A is you can actually heat the pipe up if it kinks. But with PEX B, this is PEX B, remember, you cannot heat the pipe up to get rid of the kink. You just have to cut it out or get a new pipe. So one of the biggest drawbacks of PEX is you cannot use it outside or in a room that has sunlight coming in, because sunlight will destroy PEX piping. So particularly in a bathroom, if you have a stub out for a toilet and you put an angle stop on it, that piece of pipe coming out should not be PEX, because the sunlight could hit it and break down the pipe eventually. So to fix that, you would use a copper stub out. The PEX would connect to the copper and then come out of the wall, so you don't have to worry about the pipe breaking down. I think it also looks better too. The next mistake you don't want to make is not sizing your pipes and your fittings appropriately. So the three most common sizes you're going to find in PEX piping is 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and 1 inch. And you can see the sizes here. And you really want to consider how many branches you're going to be going off of after you split the pipe, right? So they do make different fittings with 1/2 inch and a variety of different fittings. So 1/2 inch, and then you have one branch going off 3/4. So if this was coming in a line, and it could split off to 2 1/2 inch lines if you didn't need that much flow going that way. So keep in mind, if you're converting copper to PEX, it's not going to be a straight conversion. So 1/2 inch copper cannot go to 1/2 inch PEX. This is that example. So this is 1/2 inch copper, which will be sweat on, and this is 1/2 inch PEX. And you can see how much constriction we have in there going from the 1/2 inch copper to the 1/2 inch PEX. The way I would go would be, this is the same 1/2 inch copper, but this is going to 3/4 PEX. So you can see it doesn't really limit the flow. And when you compare it side by side there, it's a pretty drastic difference. So you really want to consider that when you're sizing your pipes and how many branches off you're going to be going to different fixtures before you consider what pipe size you need. Undersizing your pipes can reduce your water pressure significantly. So make sure you plan out what pipes you're going to use and what sizes you're going to use. And make sure you check out my video on how to sweat copper and convert it to PEX. I'll show you everything you need to know to make a perfect solder joint. Another mistake to avoid is not clamping and securing your pipes. These pipes are extra light when you're installing them, but think about all the water that's going to be in them, and that's going to be dragging down the pipe. And then if you have fittings on that, it's going to be dragging down and putting extra stress on the fitting. So you definitely want to secure your pipe so you don't have to worry about that. Securing your pipe also eliminates the chance of getting water hammer. So this is the shock in the pipe, right, from the change of water pressure. So if you have a dishwasher or a washing machine that is going on and off and cycling the water like that, that's going to cause water hammer. If you have loose pipes, you're going to be hearing that in your house all the time. Also, if you're putting in a shower, make sure you secure the PEX pipes up the wall if it goes to the shower head, because that will also cause a water hammer and excess noise. So there are a few different ways you can secure your PEX pipe. So there are these, which they come with a screw, and you put this against the wall and screw it in, and then the PEX pipe actually goes in here, and then you put this second connector on top of it. This is a pretty darn secure connection. So this would go in here and then put tension against the pipe. I like this one because it already has a screw, and then you can actually remove this. If you pull the tab back, you can actually remove this if you have to get to the pipe and bring it down. So this is one option. Another option are these clamps, and the downside to these, obviously they come in 1/2 inch or 3/4 or 1 inch, but the downside to these, I don't like this nail. So I take the nail out. You can get a pair of pliers and actually remove this nail, and then I like to just put a screw in there. So where that nail was, I just put a screw in here and then drive it in a little bit before you put it on the pipe. And then this actually provides way more of a secure connection, and you don't have to worry about banging it against the pipe. You know, it's just a simple screw, and this is a really gentle way to secure your pipe as opposed to hammering on it. This is also a great option because it'll let you fine tune how tight you want it against the wall. With a nail, you're not going to get that precise, but with this, it's perfect. Now we're going to talk about fittings. So you can get plastic fittings or you can get metal fittings. The metal ones are going to have slightly higher flow rates because they're going to be able to have thinner walls, because the plastic has to be just a little bit thicker. But in general, you want to make sure you first get the right kind of fitting. Earlier I talked about that PEX A and PEX B fittings look similar, but you're going to notice PEX B has the 2 main ribs here, and PEX A only has the 1 big rib. So I'm going to show you pictures of those, and make sure you're not getting PEX A fittings if you're using PEX B stuff. So once you have the right fitting, probably the most important part of this system, and the part that's going to have the most failures, is the actual crimp and how you put the ring on the pipe and how you position it. So the big thing here is, I told you we have these 2 rings for PEX B. So you'll see those 2 rings here. And then when you put the pipe on, and you slide the ring over it, you want 1/8 of an inch away from the end of the pipe. You move it out of the way, you can see the 2 ribs, sliding it over the 2 ribs, and then look where we're at. That's 1/8 of an inch away from the end of the pipe. This is crucial. You don't want to be farther away from the end of the pipe or too close at the actual end of the pipe. So this would be wrong, and then this would be wrong, because look at the ribs. They're not covered, and they're also not covered if you do it that way. So right in the middle, 1/8 of an inch away. Also tied to that, you want to make sure you have a nice flush cut of your PEX pipe. So if you're going fast, you cut an angle right here, right? This is what you do not want. This angle kind of cut is going to make it nearly impossible for the ring to get a good connection. Because if you put this, let's put the ring on. Got this on here. This pipe's hard to get on. So it may look good on one side. You're like, okay, well that's okay. And then you turn it around, right? But look what's happening here. We've got part of the rib exposed. So even if you do have the ring in the right place, it's not even grabbing all the PEX pipe. So obviously this is an extreme example, but you want to make sure that cut is as flush as possible, like on the blue 3/4 inch pipe here. you want to make sure that sucker is as flush as possible against your fitting. So avoid this. So to get the best possible cut on your PEX pipe, you're going to want to actually rotate the cutter in the opposite direction you're holding the pipe. So I'm kind of twisting the pipe this way and then twisting the cutter the opposite direction. So when you cut it like that, it makes a very straight cut. Alright, so you got your PEX pipe on your fitting. So you'll notice this ring is super loose. So if we just leave it like this, there's a pretty good chance that that ring is going to move around. We're not going to get it exactly where we want it to, that 1/8 of an inch away. So to prevent that, we want to do a pre-crimp. Now I've seen people say you can use any kind of pliers with teeth. I would not do this because anytime you're putting teeth on this ring, you could be compromising it. So those are going to create little divots, right? So anything with teeth is going to create divots, and we don't want that. So smooth jaws, I just like to use the actual crimpers. And we'll move this out of the way. So if we just use the actual crimpers to get the pre-crimp, you don't have to worry about messing up the ring with pliers. So just a light crimp there, and then look at that. That's not going anywhere. I can put a little pressure and move it, right? You see it moved a little bit. But now that ring is not going anywhere when I try to crimp it. So that's the first mistake to avoid when crimping here. And then also, you want to make sure you have that crimp ring centered in the actual crimper. So you can see that it's nice and centered. If you have this to one side and you don't get the full ring crimped, that will cause a failure. So I got the ring in the right spot, but I don't have the full ring on the crimper, right? So if I do that crimp, look what we got here. So over half the ring is crimped, but there's that little section that is not crimped. And if this happens to you, do not leave this because this could fail. So you can see how that one side is raised, right? So this is where the check gauge comes in. So you can check your work. This is 1/2 inch no go and 1/2 inch go. You can see here. So we've got this. This fits around this section, but you can see this does not fit around the uncrimped section. So we got part of it good, but not. So this is another way you can check if you can't see it with just your eye. You can check with this guy. So we want to redo this fitting. Another thing to consider here is when you are crimping, you need to crimp it straight on. So I've done a little pre-crimp here. Now if you were like struggling to get in an area here and you couldn't quite get it straight on, so you're trying to crimp it kind of at an angle here, and it actually starts to deform the crimp ring. So you can see how it's kind of bowed. It's crimped more on one side than the other, and it starts to distort the ring, and then you start to get these ripples, right? So make sure when you're crimping, you crimp it straight on. And that can be difficult in certain situations, right? Depending on how much room we have. But this is where you can pick if you have a straight crimper or an angled crimper. And you can check out my video on that to decide which one you need depending on how much space you have to actually get to the pipe. Alright, so those are the biggest PEX mistakes you can make. So just avoid all these and you'll have pipes that'll last decades. Drop a like if any of these tips were helpful, and let me know in the comments, do you have any tips and tricks for PEX?